All right, hello everybody. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Derek Leben. I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. I teach business ethics, mostly focusing on ethics and AI. Before we get started, I just want to explain what I mean by those two words, because a lot of people in this room might mean two very different things or many different things by these words. First of all, when I talk about AI, I just mean a data structure. Right? This is not something magical. This is not something mysterious. It's a data structure. That's all it is. It's usually a weighted graph. It's trained with big data using machine learning methods, and it performs human-like tasks with minimal human supervision. So we can get it to recognize images. We can get it to produce language. We can get it to drive a car, right? And maybe we can get it to do all of these things if it's a general purpose kind of system. And language models that are being now developed by large companies like OpenAI are very impressive. They could do a lot of these things. And right now, they could do things like generate video. They could generate audio. They could maybe replace human beings in certain kinds of tasks. And we're going to talk about the way that AI can be used to generate media content, which is something very exciting. I'm excited about it. But that's all it is. Let's not talk about it as something magical and mysterious, right? So when we talk about ethics, or at least when I talk about ethics, what I mean is the kinds of things that we think are permissible for people or companies to do, and the kinds of things we think are impermissible. And so all of us use words like safety and fairness and responsibility, and these are important words, but the key thing is, what do we mean by safety? What do we mean by fairness? What do we mean by responsibility? Which kind of practices actually are safe, fair, responsible? Because all of the companies will say, yes, what we're doing is safe. Yes, what we're doing is fair. Yes, what we're doing is responsible. But the question is, what actually counts as that and why? And so that's what we're going to be discussing today as well. So I think everyone here on this stage is involved in content creation, is involved in media, and I am a cinephile. I'm really excited that we're here in a theater. This is something which is very appropriate for our discussion here. So I love the way that technology and art go hand in hand often. We see that advances in technology often motivate, often inspire advances in art, animation, computer graphics, right? New developments that we're seeing in AI about voice cloning, about video cloning. We're seeing those inspiring works in film and media. It's something which I've thought about a lot in the last couple of weeks. So Elon Musk just recently in his Tesla, not SpaceX, in his Tesla presentation unveiled things like the Cybercab and the Optimus robot, and the director of iRobot posted on social media saying, hey, this looks really similar to the designs that I had in my movie iRobot. And in fact, I think that's true. We see a lot of inspiration from the media space actually inspiring the tech space, where, for example, we see Meta's Ray-Ban glasses being very inspired by Tony Stark's Edith glasses from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We see the new version of ChatGPT that has voice generation being very similar to Scarlett Johansson's character in Her, right? These are directly, explicitly inspired by media. And so what I want to talk about with our panel here is the way in which technology and art go hand in hand, and the way that ethics is going to come in thinking about in what ways we think technology and art should go hand in hand, and in which ways we are worried and concerned about the relationship between technology and art, especially in these new kinds of technologies where we could generate video, we could generate voices. Another example I had in mind, just to throw out a few examples, are, I think most of us are familiar with the Will Smith eating spaghetti video. If you have an AI system that could generate video, you could say something like, generate a bunch of images of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it does, and it looks weird, but it looks better and better. And then Will Smith actually goes on social media and imitates the AI system. I think most of you have seen this. He's out there eating spaghetti, and life is imitating art in this interesting way. Okay, so with all of those sort of examples in mind, let me ask all of you, I'm going to throw out this sort of open-ended question to start things going, which is I want to give all of the audience here an opportunity to see these artists' visions for engagement and interactions with AI. I'm going to ask you, how do you see AI playing a role in art, in media? Just to throw out some of your initial hopes, your desires, your fears, the ways you see AI playing a role in your own work, your own art in some way. So I think maybe I'll start out with Arikia, please. Yes.
Yes, thanks. It's Arikia.
I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay. So I come from the journalism world, and I founded Control X because after working in the media industry for 20 years, I've seen all of the ways that things are going wrong, and a lot of that's on the business model side. And because of the business model side, the technology side has not had the reinforcement around editorial production and creation that, say, the business mechanisms have had around ad tracking and data mining. So at Control X now, I'm coming up with ways to decentralize the media industry using blockchain technology in order to create new revenue streams for the journalistic process. And one of those potential revenue streams is through the AI industry, because if you look at all of the content that AI mechanisms have gobbled up now, thinking that it's free just because it's publicly available. All of the journalistic content that's been used to train the AI, it stops here at this moment in time. And then there's all the content that will be created moving forward journalistically. So the AI models are not stopping here either. They're going to need journalistic content in order to move forward with their technological progression. And the ways that those models have been trained using this free content in the past have not been ethical. The publications are only just beginning to be compensated, and we're only just starting to find out what wasn't compensated, and those lawsuits are just starting to unfold. So if we can create technological mechanisms that are based on consent structures from the point of the creators, where the creators can choose, do I want to allow my content that I've created with my brain to be used to feed AI models, then we can move toward a more ethical system of AI collaboration.
Great, thank you. And I think all of us are also familiar with the lawsuit that's currently outstanding from the New York Times against OpenAI, which is exactly what you're describing, where you can prompt the ChatGPT system to generate entire articles that are written by journalists. First of all, this is bad in terms of actually preventing people from reading the original articles, and second of all, it's bad because we know it's trained on those articles. And like you're saying, these journalists are not being compensated for their work, so we're going to talk about that quite a bit. Let's go ahead and turn it over to Bernie, please. I'd like you to say a little bit about how AI and these new technologies play a role in your work, and how you see AI playing a role in your work and other people's work in the future.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a writer, director, and producer, so I'm purely an artist. I use AI all the time, every day, I admit it. It's in my workflow as a director, as a filmmaker, as a writer. I use all the tools, Chat, Claude, Midjourney, all of them. I've shipped products that have used Gen AI in it, okay? Not entirely end-to-end products, but like pieces of it have used that, and I'll freely admit that. Okay, I understand there's some things that need worked out. The way I've operated as an artist is that I am not a legislator. That's what you guys do, and I hope you guys succeed in everything you just said. I want that to happen, but as an artist and as a technologist, I look at the technology, I implement it in, and then I go forward. Okay, and sure, like I have seen some blowback to myself, and had things happen, legislation, as someone who pushes new technology, AI, live streaming, interactivity. My Emmy wins are all through innovation and interactive projects. So this is the path that I've chosen. I accept it. It's not the best all the time, but it's, it works out. But I look at art and technology and business have all kind of always been together in a triangle. And if you don't understand that then that's okay. You're just kind of in one of these areas. But in order for art to thrive, the business has to thrive, and the technology has to be implemented to that and ethically in a way that benefits all. Okay, that's the goal here, right? And I give a talk tomorrow about stealing like an artist, right? It's probably going to rile some feathers, and I'm not going to spoil too much of it here. But I'm saying this now, and I'll say it again tomorrow. I'm coming at this from as I'm giving you information. I am not the legislator. I am not the rule maker. I'm not the lawmaker. If you want to spend your time and your energy to help define that future for us as artists, I'm there with you. I'm backing you, okay? But I feel that it's my responsibility to show what can and can't be done. And to yeah, there's some blatant things that are really bad. Deepfakes, not great, okay? I do not support that. I do not support like just blatant stealing, discrediting, and all that stuff. But the tools are here to stay. The tools will always be there. You have the version of the future where all the good side of this, all the legislation, they all win, right? And heck, maybe OpenAI goes bankrupt, but there will be another ChatGPT that will be above board, that will have all the things that we are fighting for in it. And that tool is going to stay. So as an artist, you have to learn the tools. You have to stay there and learn them and implement them into your workflow, or else you're going to be irrelevant. As with any technology in the history of any industry going forward. So that's where I stand, and I'm happy to get into more.
Excellent, excellent. So we're already seeing some interesting different perspectives on this, some more hopeful, optimistic, some more cautious and concerned, and they can go hand in hand too. Before we turn it over to our final panelist, I do want to also mention that they can go hand in hand. You can be cautiously optimistic, as I like to think of myself as. And when we talk about, you're mentioning use words legislation or regulation. Regulation is very important. I'm pro-regulation, but I actually don't work in regulation. I work in corporate policy because, first of all, corporate legislation from governments usually doesn't do enough. It's usually vague, ambiguous. It's up to companies and individuals, artists, to figure out how are we going to use this responsibility, to actually think about what are we going to do and why, right? So I care less about what governments or external authorities are telling me to do and more about what we think is acceptable to do. And so use words also like stealing. What's inspiration? This is extremely important. And we as individuals actually need to think about, okay, what constitutes acceptable use of this and why? Great. Okay, so let's turn it to Boris. I'd like to hear more about how you think about AI in your work, in your field, please.
I have a variety of backgrounds. I studied visual art and philosophy. I did a teaching degree, and then I went sideways in 2000 in the new economy and worked there for 20 years as a strategist and content creator. I'm using AI as a tool. Many people have the wrong perception of AI becoming an artist. AI has no intentionality. And I often say that if AI would have an intention and would have created art, what is the definition of art? My definition is it's an expression of the human condition. If an artificial intelligence is going to produce art, it should express what it means to be an AI. And then we are talking about two different species, and it should look differently. What I think what we need to figure out in the future is what creativity actually is. And that's the beauty of AI on many different levels. We talked about it before with intelligence. All the main terminology that is used, consciousness, terminology, creativity, is not defined. Yeah, we would have a different opinion about all of those words, but we need to look into it. AI forces us. What is creativity? What are different forms of creativity? What kind of creativity can I outsource to AI? Because it's very much faster than I am. Is something left for us humans? What could it be? And if you're able to answer those questions, you can set up a structure in your company. You can create the perfect team. Yeah, you can optimize the collaboration between AI and humans, because that is my focus. And I think there's a lot to do, and I'm giving some impulses tomorrow afternoon in my keynote.
Excellent. And this launches perfectly into our next question, because those questions you described, what is creativity, is exactly what I wanted to talk about and ask you about, because you used the word tool and Bernie used the word tool to describe this. There is a spectrum you could think about AI on in creative work, which is on one extreme you could think about it as a tool like you're describing, which is humans do the creative work and this is just a tool. On the opposite side of this spectrum, you could think about it as a genuine artist, as a creative agent, and AI can independently, autonomously actually generate creative work. And then somewhere in the middle, there are intermediate positions where AI can work with humans. It can actually you could offload some of your creative work onto the AI system, and it can sort of be a hybrid in terms of generating content. And so this is the next question that I want to ask all of you about. Is you said, well, if you ask each of us, we're all going to have different definitions. What is creativity? Let's do it. Let's talk about that. So I'm not going to ask you what is creativity. I'm going to ask you another question, which is, can AI be genuinely creative? How much of human creativity can we offload? And this is both a descriptive prediction about in the next 26 years. How much creativity do you think journalists, artists, filmmakers are going to offload onto AI? And an ethical question, how much in the next 26 years should they offload onto AI? So please, Annika. Yes.
So can AI be creative? Maybe. I don't know if anyone's a Star Trek fan out there, but there was the scene with Data, Commander Data, where all of a sudden he starts painting and realizes that he loves the process of creation. And so I could see a situation emerging in the future with the proper training and care and consideration and nurturing the AI as though it's a child, where AI could develop the ability to become creative. I don't think we're there yet. And I think in the journalistic world, we have a really long way to go, because if you've ever edited AI-generated copy, you know that there's this huge problem looming around the great flattening of content, where you can immediately tell it's been generated by AI. It doesn't make sense. It's gibberish. It might look like something that resembles a journalistic work, but it still requires human intervention and the editorial process, which I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is required to produce high quality journalistic content. It's not just one person writing something that comes out of their brain. It's having a sloppy first draft and then processing that draft over and over again with lots of different contributors who are involved in the process, shaping that content. And doing it within an overall context. What is the brand of the outlet that you're publishing on? Who is the intended reader of this work? How can you target this content and shape it to appeal directly to them? So we've got a ways to go.
And you use the word sloppy. There is this new word, AI slop, that's showing up in journalism, in content in general, which is this kind of stuff that's generated by AI. It feels like slop, you're right. You just read through it and it's sort of mush, it's gobbledygook. And that's actually part of the process of generating it over these large data sets, is it averages over it and it produces something that's just very bland, very boring. Just to quickly follow up with a short answer, which is, do you see more and more journalists becoming editors and generating first drafts with language models and then going in and editing?
Absolutely. I think that's always been the natural progression of journalists in their career. Once you have been edited enough, then you learn how to edit other people. Mm-hmm. And I think there is value in having a sloppy first draft that's produced by AI. It gives you a starting point. But what that does is replaces the people who would have been generating that first draft in the first place. So it's impacting the educational chain of teaching the craft of journalism. So if we're going to do that, instead of having interns in the space, paid interns, I hope, then we have to backfill. We have to plant new trees and find different systems to train the next generation of journalists, because there's much more to journalism than just writing.
Yeah, good. And so Bernie, same question, which is, in the filmmaking space, do you see predictively in the next 26 years, more and more filmmakers, use the word tool, relying more on this, using it more as an agent rather than an artist? And how do you think that filmmakers should be?
Well, so in the Hollywood world, there's kind of basically two camps right now. We'll call it three, okay? There's the people who absolutely abhor all of it, hate the AI, anti-AI, hashtag AI steals from artists, et cetera, okay? You have the people who are all in for the Gen AI stuff. And then there's the third camp, the silent majority, the people who are working actively in the industry right now, who have AI affecting all their workflows. So if they're CG artists, their crowd control shots are AI generated because they don't need to, it's easier now. If they're rotoscopers, they're not clicking around the shape of our heads and everything, the rotoscope is out. They have an AI do that. Now, does that take away a rotoscoping job from a young artist? Technically, yes. Is that a shit job? Yes. Okay, so is it a learning experience? Sure. So there's a little bit of balance here. I'm with you. I've had many interns in my career that I've hired. Pay them all right? All my writers, pay them all, right? I don't believe in unpaid work in my shows, but I also know that I have budgets, and as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as an artist, that has to adhere to make my systems flow. So as any artist who is working, that question will come. It will absolutely come in their life at some point, and they need to make a decision at that moment of, well, I can hire an intern here to do, I guess in your example, if applied to me, of write my first drafts of my shows, okay, or scenes, whatever, or I can generate a plugin on Claude, which I've done, to generate, to be clear, very shitty first drafts of scenes, and I'll rewrite them and probably change 99% of the lines. Okay, I've actually done this. Okay, so that's accurate. Going to the creativity question, I actually do think there's a part of AI that's creative right now, genuinely creative right now. It's a very small subset, and I would call that the algorithm. Okay, I think algorithms, technically AIs, and technically creatives, because they're kind of subconsciously, or how you would describe it, like they're pulling something based on data that's triggering to what you want to see at that moment. Okay, are they generating the content? No. Okay, or maybe they're pulling from generated content, but it's not all one system. The algorithm is its own system that's pulling, creatively generating, hey, I'm going to show you this right now, and it's going to work or not, right? Now, do we get a point where the algorithms are so sophisticated where it knows I like, I'm a vegan, okay, I'm in Berlin, and I'm like, I never knew that Berlin was so vegan friendly, so now I'm going to just get all this vegan content, all right? Sure, and it's just going to generate all that just on the fly for me. That's kind of useful, right, to me as a consumer. Okay, so maybe that's where it goes to. Will it more likely be a hybrid of human and Gen AI stuff in that situation? Probably. I mean, kind of looping around to like today's age, I've been asked this question before, but it's like, hey, will you just have AI just generating content for itself? And it's like, but why? Like, what? The AI is generating content for humans, so it's the human audience that's determined through data that the content is good. So the human will always still be involved at some point. At least that's my, I guess, rosy description of my future, the future that I'm thinking of, is that humans will always be involved, right? You're still going to need an elite level journalist, an elite level filmmaker, an elite level writer, somewhere in these processes at different aspects to determine this is good, this is high level, and then to see things that the AI will not, and vice versa, by the way. The AI may see things that you don't. And we've seen examples of this in like the Go documentary where the Google Mind had played the Go champion, and they did a move that no one ever saw before, but then it inspired the Go champion to do a move that no one ever saw before on top of that. So that's where I see this going, where it's like we're escalating innovation together for the future.
Just really quick follow-up. So 2 questions, one of which is when you use Claude or other systems in your own work, first of all, do you feel like it's a collaborator? Do you ever feel like giving it credit, co-authorship? And second of all, has it ever given you new ideas?
Well, in scene writing, not really. Okay. So in scene writing right now, I've only done it for this example. So I will say, hey, I'm writing a scene with these two characters. I'll give it the characters. I'll give you everything I know about the characters, location, who they are, age, gender, education, and then the situation, the scene that I've decided that the scene is going to be. It's going to be two people, one's interrogating the other about a crime, et cetera, and it generates the scene, okay? That's a pretty standard thing in television history. Law and Order has been doing it for 40 years, okay? Every other Law and Order show, NCIS and everything has been doing it for since forever. So this is not rocket science in writing, okay? If I were to write that scene myself, the shitty first draft version of that, it would take me probably half an hour to do that scene at best, okay? That thing can do it in 30 seconds, 10 seconds, all right? Now, is my first draft better than that first draft? Yeah, for sure, no question, okay? But this is a time factor now, right? And so sometimes as an artist, now this is the thing I've seen mostly for my applications today. As an artist, sometimes you need to be shown the negative to see the positive. Okay, that's a very standard thing. It's like, oh, I don't know what I want, but I don't want that. But now I know what I want. Okay, so a lot of times when I do that specific plugin where it generates a scene through dialogue, I go, man, that scene sucks. That's an awful scene. But you know what? There's something here. Okay, so I'm gonna do my thing and make the scene good, to my standards, of course. So one of the things you'll see me in my presentation tomorrow that I say is that even though I use all these tools, Claude, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and everything like that, I make sure to stand behind every word that I put out there. So if there's a mistake, if there's something that's goobly, gibberish, stuff like that, that's my fault. It's not the AI's fault. That's my fault as an artist to let that thing fly, that go to air to ship in that sense. So that's the way I look at this.
Great, and I love what you're saying because it also sheds a light on just human creativity in general without technology at all, as we start sort of reflecting on, well, what is the creative process like? What are we actually doing? We have a lot of people or even ourselves generate these ideas randomly, and then we go in and we edit and we prune and we select from. And I love the way that AI actually sort of shines a mirror on our own sort of pre-AI work as well. So Boris, you said you're a philosopher by training, by background. I am not therefore shy in asking you this deep philosophical question of, where do you both descriptively predict human creative work going in the next 26 years? Are we going to offload more creativity onto AI systems, and should we be doing this?
Well, first I find 26 years ridiculous. Yeah, I'm refusing to predict a year usually, and my answer is I have been surprised so many times in the last 2 years with things happening that I could not predict. How can I predict what's happening in 1 year, 2 years, and 26 years is just nonsense? Sorry. And I would like to ask more generally about the creative process. It always depends on the person using the AI. And people only see the generating part, but the creative process has 3 different steps. The first step is the prompt, then the generating, then the evaluation. And you need someone with background knowledge to create an informed prompt and to be able to evaluate the outcome. And from the evaluation, you start again. Yeah, you fine-tuning the prompt, and then you create workflows. And what is fascinating for me in AI is that I work with my experience and knowledge. And the older you are, the more advantage you have. But sadly, the older people are, the more they refuse to work with AI. Yeah, but you could use that. It's a knowledge accelerator. It enhances it. And I see it happening everywhere. I've been teaching workshops for 2 years. I had many professors and artists participating. I'm showing my work in exhibitions internationally. I could see the big boom starting from last year autumn, where works generated with AI are exhibited. That's going to continue. And then the most exciting work I see out there is not coming from young people. It's coming from older people that had a life, that had an experience and a background.
Just really, how are we doing? We were told 11, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to collapse the next two questions together. Good. Into a single question then, because I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about things. So the next two questions have to do with ethics very explicitly. They have to do with control over how people's data is being used in these AI systems. And they have to do with compensation for people when their data is being used in systems. And so, data can be used in a lot of ways here, but one way I have in mind is in the training process. You're training a large model on large data sets, and sometimes these are just the entire internet. And most of these companies that are going and training their models will just scrape data from some sites like Reddit, but also from other sites like the New York Times and other sites like artists' web pages. And artists, journalists have become upset about this, and there have been lawsuits. And right now, it's an open legal question to what extent this is permissible, right? The New York Times says, well, look, OpenAI's system actually generates stories from our journalists, but what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? Again, there's a legal gray area here, whether it's permissible for me to train my model on your artwork, on your words, if it doesn't generate the same exact ones. And one analogy we can give is to human inspiration and say, well, human artists, human writers go out and they see films, they read novels, and they are inspired by it. And so AI systems are doing the same thing. And if you as a human are inspired by work, you don't need to give compensation to the person you were inspired by. So why do we need to give credit and compensation to people whose data we are using in training the models? And so I'd like to ask each of you, under what conditions do you think that a company who is building a model, training it on other people's words, on their art, on their ideas, owes something, either credit, compensation, consent, to those people whose work is actually used to build the model in the first place?
So I think part of this is a technology problem, and part of this is a plagiarism problem. And the plagiarism side is human generated, and it's not new, and it's not going away just because we have technology that might be able to distinguish, because it's always an ethical consideration from moment to moment. So in the process of distinguishing, that's where you get into technological problems that are just starting to be explored, because in the journalistic situation, and even with a company like the New York Times, it comes down to the way that the content is licensed from how it was created. So how it's taken from the journalist and put into the publications. And there's actually an important differentiation where if you're on staff of a publication, then you essentially sign all your rights as a creator away to the publication, and the publication makes the decisions for how that content's used in the future. But if you're a freelancer, then you retain some rights to the ownership of your content, usually after a time period like 90 days. The rights revert back after this period of exclusivity. And there's actually a court case between the New York Times and JSTOR that determined that freelancers do retain certain rights to their content. So right now, when these publications are making deals with AI companies for who knows what swaths of content from their databases, because those decisions are not public. The legal documents around those licensing agreements are not public. We don't know if freelance content was included in the deals and if it's already being misused. We don't know if that content is even separated in the database that the New York Times is storing, or if there's a way to distinguish how the content was produced and licensed from the technological angle. So that's one of the things I'm tackling through Control X and the work that I'm doing to build better infrastructure for journalistic technology, so that, again, when it comes back to the consent of creators of publications, that everyone is aware of what they're doing, because maybe it's not an all or nothing system. It's, I want to give my content to this AI training because I know who runs the company, I understand their ethics, but I don't want to give it to OpenAI because I don't trust Sam Altman.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying, which is that transparency is always the first step in figuring out what the correct procedures and practices are going to be. So something I'm thinking of here is, Mira Murati, the former CTO of OpenAI, was asked by the Wall Street Journal in an interview, do you use content from YouTube in training your video generator system, Sora? And her answer is, well, we use publicly available data. And she said, well, the reporter, that is, asked her as a follow-up, is that YouTube data? And she kept saying, well, it's public view. It's public view. And then a few days later, the CEO of YouTube came out and said, look, we don't give consent for this. We do not give permission. Now, again, legally, it's an open question whether she needs permission, whether they as a company need permission. But ethically, we can still ask, well, should they be scraping this data from creators as well? Yeah.
So just to follow up around the publicly available data question, I think that's presenting new problems for the journalism industry specifically, because we're seeing this transition from the open web to a series of walled gardens. And what's happening is that the quality editorial content is being walled off with subscription fees because they're trying to move away from the advertising business models. But what's happening is that the open web is being backfilled with propaganda and misinformation, which the people who are putting it out there want to be free. And maybe some of it's AI generated. But when we move to systems where all of our quality content is walled off, then we have a public sphere problem, because the public can't access the information that we need to make informed decisions to run our democracies.
I agree completely. Good. So, Bernie, I want to ask in the film space, because we have a lot of cases of this. For example, Disney, where in, say, Rogue One, Disney used the likeness of a dead actor. I don't remember his name, but he played a character called, I don't know, Grand Moff Tarkin, perhaps. And I do know his name.
Peter Cushing.
Oh, Peter Cushing, thank you. Good, thank you. I appreciate that. So they did not obviously ask for his consent to use his likeness because he is super dead, but they asked his family, and his family consented. Now, the same happened with James Earl Jones, where James Earl Jones, before his death, did consent for Disney to use his voice, and so they're going to voice clone him and probably just use him in perpetuity forever and ever, or maybe.
And I'm sure his family estate's going to be paid up the wazoo for that.
Right, exactly. So under what conditions, right, do you think creators and companies and creators who are companies or work for companies, should be gaining consent permission from people to use their data? Obviously, this was a big part of the Writers Guild, Actors Guild and Writers Guild.
Both, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so what are your thoughts on this, please?
I mean, this is super gray. I am a former WGA member, meaning that I am a not active voting member, so I didn't vote on the strike. I wasn't allowed to. That's fine. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just giving you and all my shows, or most of my shows, all the Emmy-winning ones have had SAG actors. We're a unionized show, so I'm very familiar with the unions on both sides on this. So I tried to look at this very objectively, and it's really, really gray. Okay, the Peter Cushing example with a very specific person and a character. I mean, that's pretty clear to me. Okay, it's like, okay, who owns the likeness? Who owns the estate? Go to them, clear the thing. Okay. The one you said earlier, which I find interesting, I always ask this for lawyers, is the Scarlett Johansson OpenAI one. And I go, okay, clearly they were, whether they admit it or not, they were influenced by her voice and her, okay? 2, they asked her to be Scarlett to do it. She said no. And instead of just not doing it, they said, we'll get an imitator, someone else, to imitate the voice. And the world is full of imitators. You've heard people imitate Donald Trump. People imitate everybody, okay? And so it's not her voice, technically, and she's in it. And there's a lawsuit probably coming, and we'll see what happens. So again, I'm not a legislator. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just very curious to see how that lays out, okay? Because in entertainment, there's all sorts of times where you have someone imitate someone else within movies. So, for example, I know the guy who, when they do Fast and Furious movies, and Vin Diesel doesn't want to come in to loop his lines because the audio is bad when they're crashing cars all over the place, they bring in a guy that's not Vin Diesel to do the it's all about family and all that stuff. Like, there's a guy in Hollywood they call. He's the Vin Diesel. I know this guy, right? And he gets paid a lot of money to be fake Vin Diesel, right? is there a right now that job is going to go away, right? That's going to be clone Vin Diesel, 11 labs eventually at some point. That will be that, right? So where does the rights there land? I go, I don't know. I'm really not sure, you know. And so going to the writer side of this, there was I found this to be a comical ask, but I understand the ask from the writer's side. It's in the rules, the ruling. They tried to make the studios promise that they wouldn't use MBA, like scripts written under the WGA, in training models, okay? And when I first saw that, I openly laughed because I'm not saying it's not a bad ask. I'm saying, one, they're already doing it. And two, there's no way in hell that someone's going to walk into like Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, I know he's not CEO anymore, and go like, hey, so the writers that we pay millions of dollars to for the scripts, they're not going to let us train their scripts, use their scripts in our training models. You'd be like, what? Like we pay all our coders millions of dollars, and we use their training all the time. So I just thought that was like a lose-lose situation. Is there a compensation factor that can be put in? Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Hope they can do it, etc. So when I look at something like that, I go, okay, well, if you're given the tool to someone who, using the Law and Order example again, very formulaic show, a show that could absolutely be disrupted by AI tools right now because it's so formulaic. There's a crime, you solve the crime, right? Pretty straightforward, okay? You don't think that if I'm a showrunner, I'm not, but if I'm a head writer on a Law and Order type show, I can't just say, hey, this show is Law and Order Berlin, and I want to generate the 40 ideas. Heck, forget it. Let's generate 200. Give me 200 pitches for Law and Order Berlin one-liner plot so I can pitch it. I can send it to NBC and get this show approved. That process pre-Gen AI would take a team of writers weeks to do, and they would copy ideas from the past, each other, and so forth. And now I know these writers are being paid, and this is a job attrition question too, okay? Very aware of this. Today, that job can be done by probably the head writer and 2 other people working together. Let's get the 40 pitches done. Let's send them off on NBC. Let's get the pitches approved, and then we can hire the writers to write the scripts. So it's tricky. I'll admit, like I am going around this question because I do not know the answer to this question. It's so complicated to me. Again, trying to look at this very objectively from a creative and from a technology side of things. And I do strongly believe in the competition factor through technology and through, I mean, blockchain sounds great. Like I really hope that works because that's a good use for that technology. Wow, it's going to be tough.
I appreciate your honesty and just your forthrightness about how hard this is, because that's something we need to all embrace and say, yes, this is really difficult. This is really hard. It's a gray area. There's not going to be a lot of legislation that comes in. And even when it does, it's going to be ambiguous. But we have to solve it, right? We have to figure it out. We have to come down and say, are we going to pay writers and artists? And under what conditions are we going to pay them? Are we going to use their work in our model? Are we not going to use their work? So this is up to us in the next few years, whether or not it's 26, maybe it could be 2 or 1, however many, right? We need to think of what are we going to do? And that's what ethics is all about, is saying, what are we going to do, right? This is what I am going to do, and here's why I defend it. So Boris, the same question, please, about compensation and consent.
Well, let's zoom out of the details and speak more in generally so you get an overview of the problems. And if you talk about copyright, there are 3 different fields. The first one, and this is what everybody was talking about in the last 2 years, is where does the data come from? We have lawsuits running, yeah, and there will be decisions. There was one just recently in Germany that was lost, yeah, a photographer suing Lion for the open source data. And even if this is kind of solved, what model would it be? Yeah, something like Adobe, yeah, that was Firefly trained on the community. Do you know what you get? It's like a musician on Spotify, yeah, you get very, very little. Is that helping you to pay your rent? No. So, but that is the first problem, and this is the solution. It's shit. The second problem, and this is where nobody looks at, is all the models are moving towards generating images with existing images as material that you blend or as reference. You're not describing, I would like to have a certain style. You upload the image. This is the style, this is the composition I would like to have, this is the character, these are the colors, this is the light situation. And then the responsibility to be ethical is not the companies anymore, it's the single user. Can this be controlled? No. Will it be done? Yes. So what everybody then is doing is I take images from wherever it comes, I don't care, Hollywood, art history, and I mix it and I blend it and references, and at the end, who can prove that I have done so? There is no law for it. So, and nobody talks about this problem. This is the future problem. The third future problem is, if I'm using AI, am I the author? Do I have rights? And that is also a big problem because I'm very active in the German Photo Council. We try to help the European AI office to come up with solutions, how to put transparency into practice. And we need law cases about generated images. If I am an author or not, when am I the author? And it all depends on the person using it, on the complexity of the workflow. And because we don't have those law cases, everybody in the industry, in the creative industry, is less transparent than what we would actually like to have in a democracy. For a year, I have been trying to find a partner to stage such a law case in Germany. The partner needs to be the bad guy because they take an image away from me. I say, you can't do it, it's mine, and they say, yes, I can do it, it's AI, and then we force the German legal system to do so. So if there's anybody in here running a media company or a magazine, come up to me.
I love this confluence of performance art and law. This is exactly what I want to see.
I mean, I guess that's my question for you guys. How do you see globalization in your problem? Like, how do you regulate China and India, like in their tools? It's like China's Gen AI tools, just like, oh, you want Mario? There he is. There's Mario. There's Pikachu right there. Clearly that, right? It's like, I'm just curious, like, because I think globalization is such a huge disruptor in Hollywood, like K-dramas, and they're great. I'm just like, how do you see that coming in, and how do you solve that?
And another unsolved problem is the open source. Yeah, again, yeah. So me as somebody who creates images, I have come to the conclusion even 2 years ago, I can't protect my work. I can put some software on my web page, and even if it's solved, I can put robot or AI text data on my web page so it's not scraped. But is that working? Is there a general agreement? No. I don't even know how many crawlers are around. It's like putting a name of a thief on a door. You are not allowed to enter, but I don't even know who wants to rob me. So I have came to the conclusion that I said, I can't do anything against it. If I create images, if I want them to be shown in exhibitions, in print magazine, anyone can take a picture with the smartphone and use it. And that's it. That's just facts, if I like it or not.
I am not going to be regulating China. I am
Good answer.
pretty sure that at some point China will attempt to regulate me because what I'm building will establish an immutable record of journalistic truth in the world. So what will they do? It's TBD.
And indeed, I mean, what Bernie is pointing out is the problem with regulation in general, which is the EU can have as many regulations as it wants, but if you're not doing work in the European Union, if you're in China or the US, right, it doesn't really apply. It does, I know, in some cases if you're distributing in the EU or something like that. But, this is the problem, is exactly what you're describing. Good. So the last question, I wish we had more time to talk about all of this, but we only have 1:45. So quick sort of lightning round question, which is, do you think that AI is going to be taking jobs away from human artists? Do you think it should be? And I also just want to sneak this spoiler one in, which is, if there was an AI-generated novel or film or artwork of some kind, would you find this interesting if it was something that spoke to you, that inspired you, or does the fact that it's entirely AI-generated make it completely uninteresting by definition to you?
Yes, I hope AI takes the admin parts of journalism, which in the professional sector are about 90%. And AI has already generated some interesting journalistic content, but more on the funny side.
Yes to everything there. It's already happening. So in my industry, in Hollywood, AI is absolutely taking away, or disrupting jobs. I'm not saying it's taking away jobs, it's definitely disrupting, but that's the history of like humanity. Like we still have coal mining, we'd have less coal miners because you have drills, you have cranes, you know, like that I'm not saying it's a perfect example. I'm just saying that this happens. We don't have 10 dishwashers per restaurant now. We have 2 because we have a machine that does most of the heavy lifting. So creativity is going through this process, okay? And it's just happening. It's like you can hate it. It's fine, cool, hate it, okay? Don't hate the messenger, but you can hate the system. That's fine. But we're going through this. And then I would say to the content side of things, I will. What can I say? I am about to do a. It's probably more like a motion capture film, but you can use a lot of Gen AI elements. It's a full feature. But aside from that, I would say in general, my work or not, if you can't tell it's not AI, it doesn't matter.
Love it. What a wonderful, scary, frightening thought. I love it. Yeah, well, Boris, please.
Yes, it's taking away jobs. Nobody knows if it's going to create more jobs than the jobs that will be lost. It has a massive impact. And the second question, would I watch something that's totally AI generated? Do you mean without human?
Yes. No humans.
So AI has the intentionality and would like to do all of this and plus. Sure. I'm looking at all stuff and then I see if I like it or if I think it's bullshit.
Great. And if any academics want to write a paper about this, you can call it the creative Turing test, which is exactly what Bernie was just doing, and write that for free. Okay, great. So thank you to everyone, to our panel. That's our time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.